Hello, welcome back to Touchline Talk. Here with me, Simon Goodey, and here today we have Adrian Penrose. Adi, it's great to have you on. I'm really looking forward to this one. Thanks for joining me today.
No, welcome, Simon. Thank you for having us on. It'd be great to sit and have a little chat about, I guess, my background and a bit of a women's game as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, looking through your CV, your experiences, and obviously working with you at Southampton, your pathway, your experiences are fascinating. Your experience in the female game, the women's game, is very extensive. You've worked at lots of different levels with different teams, clubs, positions. Your experience in the female game is massive. So I'm looking forward to sort of really going into depth on this one, especially with the Women's World Cup on as well at the moment. It's really out there in the media eye at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. And it's been, I think, a fantastic showcase for the women's game. Just to see how it's evolved, even since the last World Cup, has been incredible. And I mean, just look at the teams that have actually gone out so far. You know, your Germany's, Brazil's, Canada's. It just shows that that gap is closing and the standards are raising, not just at home, but across the world.
No, it's great to see. It's really, really good to see. And for the women's game, I think from our experiences, or from my experiences at Saints and stuff like that, it's so great to see that finally the women's game is really progressing. And as you say, this World Cup has really probably been obviously the most recent, but one of the biggest moments where you can see a lot of nations now have a really good standard. The levels really increased, really improved. And as you say, some of the big nations to go out of the group stages has been really, really interesting to see. Great for the smaller nations to actually showcase what they can do. And it's been fantastic to watch so far. I'm looking forward to the last 16.
Yeah, agreed. Definitely looking forward. I think there's been a few standout teams. It's good to see England obviously in there. I think growing into a tournament, which most teams who go far in a tournament, they tend to grow into it and build into it. Very strong. They've been impressive so far, especially with that 4-0 win over Spain. But again, it'll be interesting to see how some of these smaller nations do, because they've caused some problems to the so-called bigger nations. And yeah, it's definitely going to be a fascinating last 16, and looking forward to seeing the rest of the tournament.
Yeah, nice. I'm looking forward to it as well. Well, Adi, just first of all, if you're happy, just to give a little bit of the viewers a little bit of an idea, what are you doing at the moment? What is your current role? What is your position at the moment?
Cool. So I currently work as a coach development officer for the women and girls game. So it's kind of two-pronged. So I'm employed through the University of Chichester, but that role is funded through the FA. So there's currently 10 of me across the country. We all work out of different universities as part of the Women's High Performance Centre network. So our main remit is to support coaches who are currently working in the Women's National League and within the Girls Academy system. And then most of us cover anywhere between sort of 3 to 5 counties. And some of us have like a mentor with us as well who will go out and will also support some of those coaches to sort of fall in line with our work. That's probably about 70% of our work. There's probably about 30% which then happens internally at the university. And that might be anything from supporting the coaches with the Bucks teams, trying to encourage more females to get into coaching, female students, supporting lecturers, adding value to the university and university life on campus.
No, sounds good. You must get a bit of an opportunity to go into some different clubs and meet lots of people. I mean, that must be quite fascinating to be able to see the different styles, methodologies between different clubs.
Yeah, 100%. I was asked this question the other day. Actually, someone said, what kind of CPD do you do for yourself? And I said, my job is CPD. Get to go into what have I got this year? 8, 9, 10. I think there's 11 different clubs that sit within the academies and the Women's National League that sit within my region. So it's the first time I've really got to go in and see so many different styles, and obviously seeing different people work under different people. But usually when you're working for a club, you just see the people that you work with. Whereas this, I think it's a very trusted role as well because people allow you to come into their environment to see what they do. But I also know you're going into a competitor's environment, so there's definitely a degree of trust and I suppose trying to defend you trust what you're doing. But yeah, I personally it's been a great education for me, and I enjoy that aspect, getting in on the grass, seeing coaches work, trying to support coaches. And some of it's always been really close to my heart. I've had some fantastic mentors and support in my career, and it's something I've always wanted to give to other coaches. I'm now in a privileged position where I get paid to do that.
No, it's great. I mean, so fortunate to be able to go and see different different clubs and see different styles, and it's just such a, from a personal perspective for you, I guess, fantastic to see and to note take and to add that to your own experiences, but also then to share because, Ada, you've got some fantastic experiences. You've been around the game for many years, and I just sort of want to just try and put it back a little bit and just go back a little bit more somewhere towards the start. So where did you sort of start your coaching journey?
So you went quite diplomatic then. You said many years. It's been about a quarter of a century now, which it just makes me feel incredibly awful. Yeah, I started going right at the beginning. I guess I kind of got into coaching simply because I had that realization, as most of us do at some point, that I wasn't going to earn enough money playing the game. But just went back to a grassroots club that I played for. The view was, do you know what, I'm going to do a year here, went in with the under sevens, I'll do a year, get a qualification, and then I'll get a job somewhere. However, back in sort of 1999 and early 2000s, just stepping into a full-time job, like without coming from a professional playing background, like it was tough. It didn't happen. Very rarely did that happen. So I actually ended up being at that club for 9 years voluntarily. The very first session I ever coached, they had a couple of girls in the session. And then at that time, they had to split it under 12s. So I guess the first thing I started looking at then was like, actually, do you know what? I think I prefer working with the girls over the boys. So we set up a girls section at the club. Within 5 years, we had 4 age groups and a senior team. Mm-hmm. And then I set up my own business off the back of that, but under the banner of a club, going into local schools looking to recruit. So we had a really successful girls program where we were averaging between 40 to 50 girls after school.
Wow.
At a local park. And this would have been about 2000, 2001. So if you start looking back at that, it's like, some clubs still struggle to get that much now. It's a lot more prevalent now. But the work we were doing, I didn't realize at the time actually how good that was until someone flagged it to me. And that kind of led into my first full-time coaching role with Sussex FA. But yeah, I enjoyed doing that. I enjoyed setting it up. A lot of things didn't tweak for me until later on in my career. It was very much, I guess what I was doing then was a lot of football development. I was planning what I was going to do. How would I get girls here? How would I set teams up? But what I didn't realize then was that everyone's researched everything and there's a theory for everything. And I didn't realize the things that I was doing, which sat really nicely in the female game. I just realised, you know what, the kids are smiling, they come back, so let's give them some more of that because I obviously like that. So we keep them coming back, and that's surely a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about, and we've had conversations about this before as well. I think when you start a program or you start something new, first of all, really, it's about participation. Without the participation, you've got nothing. So for you, especially at an early age, to put that into practice and to set up those programs and have that mindset of, look, this is about enjoyment, it's about participation, making sure the girls are having smiles on their faces, enjoying what they're doing. Ultimately, that's where so many things start from. And I think having those experiences early on is probably quite a good way to start, because you really understand, for a lot of coaches out there, sometimes you try and want to think about it too elite, too early, but actually, especially in new programs, as you're saying, it's more about the participation, the enjoyment, and building that love for the game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, don't get me wrong, I had 3 aspirations when I started. It was to work at get a full-time job in football. That was one of them. I wanted to get towards my A license, and I wanted to work with senior professional players. I knew at the time I was still quite a way off from doing all of them. I have achieved all of them now, but in the women's game, and some maybe more through luck than judgment. But I do believe sometimes you do create your own luck by putting yourself into positions and being willing to step forward and to take things on and to try things. I do believe that hard work will pay off at some point. But yeah, you're right. I think as far as that first piece of trying to have participation, smiles, enjoyment, I actually think there's still so much energy from like those first steps into the game to working with top end senior pros. It still needs to be fun. It still needs to be enjoyable. They have to come into the building every day, and if that does feel like a chore, it doesn't feel like it's fun. It's like any job, isn't it? It's still a job. It's a job we all say we'd love to do. Of course we would. We'd all love to play football, but if you go into any job and you don't enjoy the environment you come into, and it's not fun, it's not excitable at times. Like,
no, 100%.
It's going to be hard work.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, from your first time, your first full-time role at Sussex FA, you were sort of overseeing, is it community side for the women's and girls? And
yeah, so there was a program of community sports coaches, so women and girls community sports coaches. Most of the county FAs had one. So it was kind of off the back of the work I was doing. The girl I was working with at the time had a partner also worked through the county FA and said, actually, look, I think you should have a look at this guy. Like, he's doing some great work there. I still had to apply and go through a process. But again, this is where maybe where you start creating some of your luck, because I had put myself out there and I am doing things, recommendations, people vouching for you, people actually having seen what you're doing. It does help. And I know through my role quite often now, like, people say, oh, do you know so-and-so? Where do they work? Do you know what they're like? And not just as a coach, as a person as well. I think that's something that you probably see as a recurring theme throughout. I think that personable side. And just, at the younger age, I was not a tactically or even technically astute coach. I really wasn't. But I knew I did certain things. I valued people, I valued relationships, and I valued the experience that they were getting, which is why they kept coming back. And especially at that, what's this word I'm looking for? I guess that grassroots, that introductory stage to football, that's so important. But still skill sets which are going to carry you through and hold you in good stead, especially in the female game, because we know that they're things that are valued in the game. So yeah, I was really lucky in that first role at Sussex FA. I actually had a couple of stints out in the States as well. I did like the holiday camps and academy stuff out there. But yeah, came back. That role, although it was front end delivery, what was really great is my line manager at the time, a lady called Michelle Lawrence. She actually let me do some of the football development side as well. So what I started doing was getting a bit more of a rounded understanding of how to plan a bit more strategically. I wasn't incredibly strategic back then, but she was great with that. But it gave me some insight into how that worked, because if we've got an end goal, very seldom do we just get there. There's usually some sort of plan or pathway to get there. But help me understand a bit more about the planning stage, budgetary stage, delivery stage, a bit more around reflection. And I think that stood me in quite good stead moving forward.
Yeah, no, I mean, it looks like a really good experience, and just looking through, obviously, your work before that, your work in what you were doing with Sussex FA had obviously, you'd obviously learned very quickly and were able to really make a big impact and influence a lot of young individuals really, really early on, because then that quite quickly, I think it was it a year, something like that? Then you end up transitioning to the FA, is that right?
Yeah, it is. So the FA set up, I'm sure some people who get to listen to this or maybe even coach within the FA Skills program. So yeah, I was lucky enough to be one of the initial, I think there's 66 of us. I'm not sure that was done. I think that was done very deliberately, having 66 of us employed initially. But yeah, so went through the process to become an FA Skills coach. But again, I think that's because of the role I'd been doing. I knew a few other people had done that role and stepped into the skills coach role. So yeah, started there in 2007 and was one of the first through the door and one of the last out of it when the program ended 11 years later. But yeah, that was probably, looking back, the biggest opportunity I'd had in my career to date, in as far as working for a national governing body. And at the time, we didn't realise who we were working with, which will sound so naive. But when I look back, and I look back at just some of the people I got to learn from, from a regional line manager level, I was really lucky. And I'm going to name drop, but I'll put some names in there, the likes of Tessa Payne, Ben Bartlett, Pete Sturgis, John Allpress, Paul Holder. These were people that we had access to so regularly. What we also didn't realise at the time was that even within our teams, I look now at the people who came through that program and the roles that they now hold in the game. And we've got everything from international senior managers to heads of phases, boys, girls football. Some came out of football and went into teaching. But again, we had such a good understanding of what that primary school system looked like, because that was a huge part of the program. And I think now, looking back, the people we worked with and connected with every single day, and there was such a value put on our education as coaches and put on it properly. You know, we were given time and we were paid properly to plan, to deliver, to reflect. It was just such I guess, an incredible opportunity and experience from an educational point of view.
Yeah, I think one of the big things going back for a while at that time was the youth awards, the youth modules.
Mhm.
Like those
Yeah,
qualifications were. I mean, you look at how they're structured, how they were written, how they were put together.
Mhm.
You know, a lot of thought, a lot of time has been put into those qualifications, and you know, you look at that being. I mean, I was at Col United at the time, and they'd just been rolled out with us, with John Allpress, Peter
Mhm.
Trevian, and it was absolutely fantastic. Like those courses, I think, have had the impact on football that we are seeing now in both the male game and the female game, without a doubt.
Mhm.
I mean, those courses, those experiences, the education that we were given through those courses, for me, was exceptional. I love the style, the methodology, and yeah, they came at a really important time.
Yeah, agreed. It was probably the first time that I went on a course, and we were used as a guinea pigs for skills program. We were the pilot courses for young youth mods 1, 2, and 3, and advanced youth as well. I'll come on to that, but it was the first time I went on a course, and the course material really, it just resonated with me. It felt right. It felt like the right way to do things, and that's not to belittle or disregard what I'd done on my level 2, my B license at the time. But it just felt right. It was then you had all these tools, I guess, and it was figuring out, when do I use the right thing at the right time. And it wasn't saying that stop, stand still, we shouldn't do this and we should do something else. It was just recognizing when we had to use it for the benefit of the players and the individuals.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
I totally agree. I think those courses really supported the development of the game. I think obviously in the boys' game, the Triple P came about, and it fell in line with that. And I think the Advanced Youth Award then took the youth modules that step further, and just another level, and several layers of understanding across each of those sort of four corners, and player development.
yeah. No, without a shadow of a doubt, I remember those courses so vividly. That they just, like you say, I mean, for me, they had a massive impact on my coaching, the way that I saw the game, especially in youth development. You know, like you say, you know, like with the level 1s, 2s, and 3s and stuff like that. It was definitely a different style to how those youth awards were delivered, and the methodology behind them, which obviously I think is the reason why they were rolled out and why they were developed in the first point, because you know, you looked at how some of the other countries had been developing and progressing, and you see the research, and obviously I've read lots of different things from Ben Bartlett, and you know, the constraints led approach, stuff like that, and you read more of that, and you just you understand the logic behind it. You understand how that is going to help the players. You understand how that's going to help the coaches, and ultimately, those different aspects that you go through those courses, and obviously having the luxury and to be in that position with the FA when those courses were coming out. I think I was also quite lucky. We had Pete and John also deliver with us at Co United as being, I think, one of the first clubs to really have that involvement. I definitely took it as really lucky to be in that position at that time to go through those courses because for me they made a massive change to the style of football and the development that we see with players now.
For sure. And I look back and I look at those 11 years I spent in that program, and I just look back with, I guess, fondness. I was working for a program where actually how we delivered, I agreed with everything. There wasn't anything that I really disagreed with in the philosophy. Everything felt good, and everything was centered around the child. The best bit, probably again looking back and reflecting with ex-colleagues from that time, is how actually we almost generated competition between ourselves within our teams. And I went on and was lucky enough to lead sort of my team and start a bit of management around managing other staff. Certainly made some mistakes with that initially. We'd like to think.
Don't we all?
Yeah. And in fact, I think I should probably say this before I carry on, is everything up to that point, and even now I still fail. We should have a little bit less now, but I understand certain bits now. But I cringe at some of the stuff that I was doing back in those sort of formative days of my coaching career. Some of the stuff was just, I'd love to go back and give those kids a different experience. I think they enjoyed the experience.
Yeah, but I mean that's it. No, like I guess the most important thing of that is experience. It's like you say, in those formative years, I think with anybody, it doesn't matter if it's coaching, whatever it is, whatever industry that you are working in those first years, you have to make those mistakes, and ultimately you will look back on them and go, did I really do that? And that is part of the journey. It's the same as what we ask the players to do. We ask the players to make mistakes. We deliberately put players in some sessions, in some practices, knowing that they're going to fail, and we're going to really push them in order for them to improve. And we have to do that as coaches. We have to be happy with that. We have to understand that. And ultimately, I think being in those positions when you're uncomfortable or you might make mistakes, ultimately it's not about making those mistakes, as long as they're obviously not serious and they're safeguarding and all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
But your reflection after those sessions is the key. It's a case of, right, I did that session, I did that practice, it was too big, it was too small, I had too many numbers, not enough footballs, didn't even have goals or whatever. And after the session, you sit down and you reflect on it yourself or with another coach, and you just brainstorm, you share ideas, and ultimately that is where we all improve as coaches. The game improves, coaching improves, and we as people improve. And you have to have that willingness to reflect, accept your mistakes, learn from those mistakes. Otherwise, if not, then your ability to move forward and take a step forward is dramatically reduced.
Agreed. And I think that was one of the biggest things which, again, when I reflect back on that part of my coaching career, we was going into primary schools, and we'd often go in, and in our team, we'd often go in pairs. So we might have 3 or 4 sessions back to back. So I might lead in the first session, and then one of my colleagues might lead in the next one. But all they wanted to do was make sure that their version of that session was better than my version. So then I'd see what they do to try and make the session better. And then I'd think, right, it's my turn next. I'm going to outdo them. And it was a friendly competition. But what it did, it just pushed us to strive to be better, like continuously. We had 11 years of that. We were always looking to almost not one up each other in a bad way, but just how do we tweak that? How do we do this?
Yeah.
And what was great is that because we were employed full time, we had time where we could sit and discuss it and pull it apart. And we come up with these the different sort of creative sessions we come up with, especially in the primary school sector. And for me, I believe it's just my belief. I believe every coach that when you first start, you should have to go and do it, even if it's just one term in a school, because the skill sets you learn are just they're crazy. I mean, this is how I usually pitch it to people: is you might go in and you've got a group of 30 year six kids, but it's snowing outside, so you have to go in the hall, which is no bigger than your living room, and there's a stage and a Christmas tree and a piano, and there's a display of work. You can't use the proper balls because they might smash a window, so you've got to use the sponge balls. You've got a boy or a girl who are playing at academy level. You've got a couple of them telling you they hate football because it's the worst thing ever and they're not going to do anything. But somehow you need to try and help them all learn and somehow try and get them to fall in love with the game. And I always saw that as a child. I loved the kid. I'd always ask, anyone here really hate football? And there's always a couple, yeah, I hate it. Well, how come? Oh, because I don't know. I did it once. I didn't like it, or I prefer rugby, or whatever the reason was. So then it was trying to really delve in to what was it? Why did they not like it? And quite often the kids that weren't as good at football or hadn't played as much, they didn't like it because of the ones that did play. And let's be honest, quite often it was the boys who come with a bit of ego. I'm the best, and I'm going to tell everybody every second of the day how great I am at football. And these other kids, they didn't deal with that. So we started hearing, maybe splitting them into smaller groups, sometimes splitting them into confidence groups. I found that was something really useful, because you can be really confident at something but not particularly good at it. But that means that you can go in with people who are better. You're happy to be stretched and challenged by them, but it's not going to knock you. So, but also the reverse of that, we meet some kids who were actually very pretty talented. They just didn't have any belief in themselves. So it was just always trying to find ways where, how can we give the child the best experience so that they are going to want to keep coming along. And then what was great is after the weeks, you could see, like, if you had like a not very confident, really confident and in-between group, they started shifting themselves. And that was great, because now they started to self-assess themselves as well. So they started having a better understanding of where they fit within the group. And for me, that was one of the most rewarding bits, was seeing actually how you could take someone who told you they hate the game, and sometimes within 6 weeks, they're telling you, actually, that's all right, that I quite like that. What else is there for me to do? And that's when you hooked them.
Yeah, no, I like it. I've done actually something similar in school, and you know, that sort of really asking those students and players and stuff like that, where is your confidence level? And yeah, I think that as a tool can work really well. And as you can see, you know, the progress that some of those players and individuals made through, like as you said, that time period shows, you know, maybe at this moment in time they're not ready. You as as an individual, your relationship and how you are with those individuals is key. And I think one of the key things that you spoke about there as well is differentiation and adaptability as a coach, which, you know, we as coaches get thrown these challenges every single session, every single day.
Sure.
And I think, you know, as coaches or PE teachers or, you know, those sorts of things, you know, the adaptability that we have is right up there with the professionals, the top professionals in the world, in whatever other profession it is. Like, as you said, you might have to deal with weather conditions. You might have to deal with no footballs, or you haven't got enough footballs, or you plan for 15 players and then all of a sudden 12 turn up, or you plan for 10 and then 20 turn up. It's like all of those things from a coaching journey. Like you say, you know, going into a school and having a term's experience or a year's experience, you know, those are invaluable experiences that people, coaches especially, as obviously we're talking about that, it just you cannot put a value on those experiences, because that knowledge of how to deal with those situations. And as a coach, you know, you've planned your session, it's 5 minutes to 7, your session starts in 5 minutes, and your goalkeeper doesn't turn up.
Yeah.
You know, you're working on shape and you're missing a couple of players, and you've got minutes to adapt your session to make sure that the players that actually physically are there can get out what you want them to get out, and not just, right, no, I've not got my goalkeeper, I'm missing my 2 centre halves. Well, the session's in the bin, I'm going to do something else. No, I think generally us as coaches, we really do have a fantastic ability to differentiate, to adapt in really small amounts of time. And I think that is a skill that, as coaches, like you say, you know, having that experience in a school setting really, there's no better. If you're in a professional environment, normally you have contact with players before, or parents will message you and say, look, this player's not going to be here tonight. So you can plan a little bit more in advance. But in a school setting, no chance. You might be in the middle of a lesson, and then teacher comes over and goes, well, I need these three for extra maths or extra literacy or whatever. And you're like, okay, you just have to get on with it and adapt and carry on. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, I guess part of the reason I brought that up is that I think that's really served me well in future experiences later on in my career. Because then when you get to a session, I won't name names, but one of the head coaches I was working with, we get to a session, someone's out, the physio said, look, I can't join in. His head's rolling, thinking, oh God, what? Oh, how do I adapt this? I've spent so long planning, and I'm just looking at it like, yeah, no worries, like we just do this and we do this, and that's from the background that I had. It's definitely served me well, I think, throughout. I think that's just my advice. I think any young or aspiring coach should have to go and do a bit of apprenticeship doing that. Some may do it because actually, do you know what? They love it, and some people are good at that. Not everyone aspires to be at the top end of the game. Sometimes it's recognizing where your skill sets sit and where can you best add value.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I mean, just to transition a little bit. I mean, that for me is fantastic. You then did some work at Hampshire Centre of Excellence, is that right? And then that sort of obviously then transitioned into sort of the Saints RTC program. But talk to me a little bit about Hampshire FA.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm going to rewind at one step before that. So when I was at Sussex FA, I was also working at Brighton Hove Albion Girls Centre of Excellence. So all of these jobs overlapped because we're crazy in football. None of us are just happy with doing one job, are we? We'd like to do like at least 3 or 4 jobs at a time. And in fact, in 25 years, there's only 1 year where I've ever just done my job, my full-time job. Every other year of that, I've always done something extra, if it's voluntary or paid or whatever that may be. But yeah, so I started there. When I moved to Hampshire for a skills job, I also went, and in fact, it was the first year I moved here. I just did my job for a year, and then spent a decade working with Hampshire Girls Centre of Excellence, which then eventually transitioned into Southampton's RTC. So yeah, I love working in the female game. I'd worked with some girls in Sussex who had stepped into that Centre of Excellence program, had the opportunity to work there. My full-time job linked in with Hampshire FA anyhow, because that's where we kind of partnered with and supported them. So I just reached out and said, is there any coaching roles within the girls' centre? I'd love to get involved. And yeah, had a fantastic time, I think, working with, we call them elite players. They're still kids at the end of the day. They still went to bed for Teddy. And we have to remember they're still kids. They're just kids that are really good at moving the football around. That's what they were. Or they were a bit better than some of their peers. So yeah, did a lot of work, I guess, in that foundation phase with the Centre of Excellence. So 9s, 10s, and 12s. But again, that's where I saw myself at the time. I really specialised in that foundation phase, and a lot of my experience and what I was doing with the FA at the time really transitioned well into that. So I was given quite a lot of free rein at times to try different things, to deliver different things. Had numerous technical directors there, I think 6 in the end, maybe 7, of which a lot of them, until probably the latter 2, kind of said, well, you know more about this than me, so just get on with it. So in some respects, it was great. In other respects, it's like, just, I need someone who can really support me more. But yeah, it was sort of lots of changes within that girls program. There's times where we were going and playing in, we actually switched regions. So we were in the southeast, where we had the likes of Brighton's, Chelsea's, Reading's, Arsenal's, some of the perceived top girls' academies in the country. We then switched into the southwest, so we were playing more of a county FA based, Somerset, Dorset, Devons, Cornwall. And what we were finding, I think, across some of these regions is that some regions had enough girls that you'd say, actually, do you know what, this is excellence, or this is as close to it as you can. Others had maybe 1 or 2 girls that were at that level when they were just populating with the best of what was left, which was essentially just a grassroots program. So then I know there are some changes in certain regions. I know in the east and the southwest, and they looked at advanced development centres so they could bring the best of the best together and really kick them on. And we can see the byproduct actually as one of them in the England squad now, Katie Robinson, I know from that South West. She was a product of part of that program. There's others coming through that. But yeah, really good opportunity to work with, I guess, the best players that we had in that region at the time. Loved traveling to different games, traveling to different clubs, the opportunities. I think as a coach, it was probably the first time I started seeing, probably having to think a bit more tactically about what we were doing. And sometimes I'd get a bit torn between the competition and the winning around and the development. And although it was very much still a development, I started seeing actually, well, winning can really help development because it can build confidence and it can build trust from players into the coach, because now we're asking them to try and do certain things and they're doing it and it's working. So they just start believing a bit more in what we're saying and how we're trying to support them. So yeah, I think that was probably the first time where I started really considering where's the balance sit, winning versus development. I think I've got a fairly level understanding. I'm not saying everyone would agree with where I sit with that, but it's definitely a part of the game and probably the first time where I had to really consider that and how it could impact and support the development of players.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting debate. We probably don't have enough time to debate the theme of process or outcome. Both have legitimate arguments for both of those. But yeah, no, I mean, obviously you were with Hampshire for a very, very long time. Obviously, that then transitioned into the stuff at Saints. What sort of happened for you in those moments? So I obviously remember us working together for a while.
We did, yeah. So the Southampton picked up. Obviously, it transitioned from Centre of Excellence to the RTC program, which is now transitioned again into the professional game academies. So the system has changed again this year with emerging talent centres as well. So it's exciting to see where the program goes. So at the time, there was probably a bit more requirement on time. The contact time went up a little bit for girls. So I actually initially went into more of a part-time role and more of a casual coach, just dipping in and helping where I could across the different age groups, because I was becoming aware that through my full-time job. And in this period as well, I also had I've got two kids myself. They were both like toddler, baby, and it's just trying to figure out, okay, well, all of a sudden my time had just, I felt like I had this time and it just disappeared. And I was always been one, I certainly didn't have kids to just see more of other people's kids in my job. So so sort of did that casual coaching, picked up and supported as and when I could. And that then led a couple of years later back into Southampton, looking to start again the women's section, which when the parent club initially got relegated from Premier League, they pulled the plug on all of the girls program, which is where Hampshire FA actually picked up the Centre of Excellence, a decade before. I was lucky to be put in position as a head coach of our under-21s team. What we did have to do though was go and start in like the lowest tier, Hampshire League. So it was definitely a different way of doing things, because we had girls that were sitting on the England talent pathway and playing for England youth teams, but performing at a weekend in what was a Hampshire County FA Women's League. So it was a different way of doing it. I'm not sure there's many other clubs that have sort of gone around that way. There's a couple of examples. But yeah, we literally started right from the very bottom there. And I think they'd had a really successful time there. Got the team promoted, gave players opportunities, of which one of them actually is still, from that initial squad, she's still playing there now in the Women's Championship. And one of the others has literally just moved on by playing in Tier 3. So we definitely provided opportunities and a platform, and that was definitely the starting point of where the club has now gone.
Yeah, no, it's great to see. I can remember seeing some of those players. Obviously that transitional point was really, really difficult and a big challenge. I remember obviously coming in with you for that year and watching and helping you out with some of those sessions and stuff like that. And like you say, you got players there that are in the elite pathway, and then on a match day, the level is very different.
It's grassroots.
It was very challenging, and I guess some of the things that I remember from that time was that the training sessions really needed to be ultimately they were the biggest challenge for the players, because the level was pretty good, and it's about trying to progress them with that challenge within training, because that you come to the weekend and it's going to be a different challenge. What were some of the biggest sort of things you took away from working with that? Was that the first sort? I mean, I know you've done some women's stuff a little bit before, but was that really the biggest challenge you'd had within the women's game?
So I had worked as a head coach in the women's game before, so that was in regional leagues, Tier 5, Tier 6. This was probably the biggest challenge with this was probably the first time I was kind of in charge of, we had a multidisciplinary team. So actually we had staff who could really specialise in certain aspects of the game to really help kick individuals on. So for me, it was always really important. And this is where I took probably some of my learnings from FA skills, where I'd managed staff before. So actually, I needed to understand a bit more about what they did, what they brought to the table, how it was going to impact the bigger picture. Because also, I knew for some of them, it was the first time they stepped into a more senior environment. And what I didn't want them thinking was that, oh God, we're just going to have this coach who's going to tell me what to do, when to do it, how to do it. They're going to ignore what I say. I'm very much in collaboration, trust. Listen, you tell me what it is. Let's look at it. Let's work with it. Let's discuss it. If we can make it better, let's make it better. So I think that was probably the challenge, I guess, the off-pitch bit with managing some staff. And then I guess the on-field bit was just how do we keep levels of intensity and standards high? And that was where, I guess partly sitting under that umbrella of Southampton, it's something really key to the club. My line manager at the time, I learned so much. So Lois Fiddler was our technical director at the time, but again, I picked up so much from her just around, driving the session, the intensity of the session. Because we still, although they were all in a senior team, the levels between the top player and the bottom player were not like this. It was still quite wide, possibly wider. And that's not to belittle the girls, it's just where some of them were at. And what we wanted to still try and do is retain the best players we had. And actually, in hindsight, I look at some of those girls that are now playing first team and have come through the youth pathway. Actually, coming through the divisions has possibly been one of the best things for them. Because as they're growing from a 16-year-old to 17 to 18, and they're moving through, and they're growing as the challenge grows, and some of them are now flourishing within that first team, and some had left, and some have come back to the club since. But again, I think that was I think that's been quite a good thing. If this is outside looking in, I don't work at the club now, but I think that's been a good thing for some of those individual players, and it's definitely helped them with their careers and where they're at now.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. During the time we were there, the standard that was driven from the TD in terms of Lois was top. All the way through from the little ones all the way to the top. The standards were really, really high, really demanding. I mean, I remember arriving early to sessions and seeing Lois on the grass with some of the young girls, doing extra little bolt-on sessions and stuff like that. And that's your TD that's there working with those players. And, when you talk about leading by example, that was probably the biggest thing that I always took from my time at Saints, because Lois was one of those that you just go, wow, okay, and there's similar to what you said before, is you don't always sometimes take some of those learnings until later days. And I think when I look back on, from a personal point of view, working with Lois, to work with someone of such high caliber, such high experience and such high drive, for all of the players, for us as coaches that were involved at the time, was just incredible. The standards were brilliant, and I think that's something that personally I've really tried to take on post my experience at Saints.
Yeah, I can say that. I think that's exactly my same feelings about that. that time when we got to work there. And then some of that had been set in place with some of the TVs before. Again, she just not showed up the level and seeing work ethic, the standards, what she wanted to do and how she was going to drive that. Like you said, Lee, for example, I couldn't say any better. Again, just another person who had the privilege to work with and to learn from and still do things to this day that, we got picked up and learned from that time in my career.
Yeah, I mean, to sort of move that on, and I guess that's also a part of the reason what's probably helped you in your next sort of roles. So I know we're just sort of moving on for time, but I know your roles after that were at Yeovil and Lewis, working with the senior teams at really, really good standard, really good levels. So just give us a little bit of an insight into those.
Yeah, so my time at Southampton, it came to an end. I then had the opportunity to jump, and I think this is probably quite obscure, I guess, in the game. I almost jumped from what was sort of tier 7 at the time to tier 1, which, if you're looking at a player to jump from there to there, is huge. For a referee to jump from refereeing that level to the top is crazy. We'd all say it's crazy, and in some respects, you probably look at that from a coaching perspective and say, God, you landed on your feet there and you did well with that. And in some respects, yeah, and I'd accept that if someone threw that at me. So I was lucky enough, I was given the opportunity to come in as assistant manager at Yeovil Town, so they just stepped into the Super League at the time. Very close friend of mine and former colleague, and still chat to him most days, and actually live around the corner from one another, Lee Birch. So he came in, he asked me to come into that role. Obviously, we'd worked together lots of times before. I think part of that, again, and I spoke about creating that luck and those opportunities. What I don't think I think sometimes knowing people in the game and people who can vouch for you and put good words in for you, yeah, it's going to hold some weight. Of course it is. But I think by the time you start getting to that level of a game, people aren't going to give you jobs if they don't believe you can do the job, because it will impact them. And it's always the head coach that loses the job. So it's the head coach that's trying to employ you and bring you in. They have to have that trust and belief and faith that you can deliver against what it is they need you to do. So I got that opportunity to step in to a Super League. The FA Skills program had just finished. My role at Southampton had ended, so there was nothing really to stop me from taking that step. I took that step. I did a crazy commute every day from where I lived up to Bridgewater, where we trained. But I think that's something like we just tend to do in football. We do crazy things sometimes for opportunity. It's first time stepping in, working with sort of senior professional players, and actually the first time for some of the players being senior pros. And I think initially it was very much a learning curve for a lot of us in the building. It was figuring out how hard we could push them, when we could do it. We probably broke a few players through us understanding the physical capabilities. A lot were going from a part-time evening program to a full-time daytime program. And definitely there were lessons that have served me well and helped me when I was in a future role at Lewis, and we were transitioning our program from almost like semi-pro to professional and having more contact time. So great experience. I guess biggest learning curve there was just having to watch so much more of the game, because the game moves so much faster. The game was shifting at a pace. The quality of the players, the standard of the coaches, the actual tactical stuff going on the touchline between coaching staff. That's probably some of the biggest take homes I had from there, is that you can see it, we need to act on it. Because if we don't act on this promptly, the game can be gone. And at the time when we were playing, your Chelseas, your Arsenals, your Man Cities they were a mile ahead of everybody else. Obviously, as the season went on, there were some financial irregularities of the club. We got docked 10 points, and getting docked 10 points in what was an 11-team league that year it seems quite a big challenge. To be fair, Coventry overcame that challenge just a couple of years later. But when you're playing those teams, and we knew the teams we had left to play, we actually lost 7 games by 1 goal. So we knew we were quite close to it. They probably looked at certain things that actually we probably didn't quite have the strength and depth within the squad that other clubs had at the time. And actually having real key players, and we had some excellent players. They're still in somewhere. They're still doing fantastic things in the game. They've gone on and done bigger and better things since. But yeah, really good experience for me to have to see the game at that top end. What do these real top senior internationals look like? How do we as coaches and how do we act better, act faster? I guess it's almost understanding a lot of the what ifs. That's when I really started thinking about that. What if we have a player sent off? What if we go 1-0 down? What if this happens? It's almost having like some solutions to those problems, so we're not having to sit and waste time thinking about them.
Yeah. No, it's a good challenge, as you say, like to go from all of those different levels, to come from Saints to work with the juniors, and then to go up a lot of levels, if you like. It's a real good learning curve that a lot of your previous experiences would have allowed some progress for that, but also, like you're saying, that it's a case of being in there and really trying to learn quickly and try to transition that to yourself and to the players as quickly as possible. And you mentioned a little bit there about Lewis. So you moved on from Yeovil to Lewis. How was that?
Yeah, so obviously the team got relegated twice. It was a double relegation for Yeovil, financial bits that were happening. An opportunity. I actually went back to Southampton Women in the Women's National League Tier 4 just to tide me over for a few months, and an opportunity arose at Lewis. So yeah, probably similar, I guess, in respect to Yeovil at the time. And although Yeovil had the badge and were connected to the club, still a smaller club. But again, went in there as just a member of first team coaching staff. Was crazily doing that alongside my full-time role as well, which was challenging. But as you've already gathered from here, I quite like doing multiple jobs at multiple times. I think what was really good there is I had some learnings and understandings from what that next level looked like. There's definitely bits, if I could go back and repeat that experience, there's definitely things I'd do differently or change, which I think may change some of the outcomes of what we were trying to do. What we had here was a club that was really looking to progress and to build and professionalise. So the first season in there, or first half season I was in there, was we were very much still training evenings. We kept the team in the league. It was a year, I think COVID hit, so the season ended up getting curtailed, and I think they went on the points per game. My memory's gone with that, but we did stay in there with that. What happened the following season, although we were still in that COVID, because we were playing at that elite level, we had compensation to come out to work, to train, got COVID testing a lot, every day almost. But what we managed to do there was it gave us a period of time where we could plan, because although we weren't in the building, we could still jump on calls like this today. We can still do things and we could plan. So what we managed to do, we realised what we had in the building. We realised this was really the first time, and there's a bit of a saying, and we use this sometimes, is, to what is tactically desirable needs to be technically achievable. And I can't remember where I got the saying from, but I love that saying, because we knew how we wanted to play, but we also had to look at it and we said, we haven't got the players who can technically do that yet. So we're going to have to adapt ourselves and play in a different style, which we think will get us points, which if we're in a good enough position at Christmas, the club have said, well, look, we'll invest some more and we can look to try and bring some players in, which will help us enhance that. Which is exactly what we did. We became a very stubborn, hard to beat team. And if we could go 1-0 up against you, it was really tough for teams to turn us over. We then managed to add a bit more quality and depth to the squad around Christmas time, and we took the club to 5th place in the Women's Championship, which is still to this day the highest finish they've ever had. But again, that was probably, we had a few more staff there, so it was working as a part of a bigger unit. That was, again, for me, working under a different head coach. And this is something I've had to do across my career as well, is different clubs I've been at Saints, like it was very much, this is how we want you to play. So how do I take that and interpret that and deliver that to players? At Yeovil, it's very much led by Lee, who was the head coach. This is my playing style. So I'm now having to interpret that. And again, we went to Lewis, and it was again it was the first time I've really, I guess, looked in depth at periodization, positional play, but also could see how good that could be, especially from a defensive piece. We got our team set up exceptionally well defensively, which is what really got us these points on the board. We then started the following season. Unfortunately, four games in, I was relieved of my duties. I think the club had set some expectations for us. They didn't feel we were going to hit those. But look, that's by the by. I had a fantastic time there. Made a lot of friends. And again, it's still good to see the amount of players that were there who are still playing in the game and playing at a good level and having success. But again, they were probably some of my key learnings, I think, from working there.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic to hear, really, like all of your journey, all of your pathway, for all of the different groups, the levels, the different time periods, and the different environments is fascinating. And obviously, to have all of those experiences together within the male game, but probably more specifically the female game, probably just allows you now to reflect on those experiences really, really well, and really, really detailed, actually, probably in your reflections, to go, right, these are the things that for me worked really, really well, and the things that I need to look at to either improve myself or to then adapt or change slightly to benefit me for the future. I mean, what were some of your sort of big takeaways, or just to sort of summarise and to think, right, okay, either for yourself or for coaches? Obviously, we've got the Women's World Cup and stuff on at the moment. I'm sure that there's going to be many coaches out there who are going to be really inspired by the Women's World Cup and thinking, okay, I'd like to get into the female game. I'd like to volunteer. I'd like to try and find some work. What sort of things, from your experiences, what advice or what sort of things could you give people to consider or to think about when looking for that?
So I guess a couple of things I always said is I always think you should go and work in two environments. One where you get a lot of autonomy over what you do and how you go about doing it, because then you can fail and have to almost reflect on your own. But then if you can work in an environment where you've got someone who's more senior or more experienced, where you can bounce things off and you can see them, I think it gives you a real balance. And I'm probably a bit biased because that was my journey and I had lots of that. I spoke about the school
Always
work.
two jobs, no?
I think of school stuff, differentiation. It's just served me well, actually figuring out the motivations of players and individuals. Why are they here? What do they want from it? And how do I give them the best experience? I think that serves you well throughout everything. The other piece that I haven't touched on yet is also trying to keep yourself grounded. So yeah, I managed to achieve and have worked at some good levels of the game, but still to this day, I work in grassroots. I coach my eldest son's team. For my sins, I coach my son's team. I steer clear of the youngest son. But I still do that and have done that from sort of under sixes, they're under 15s this season. So I've really tried to make sure that I haven't tried to drift too far from where I started. I started in grassroots. I'm still working in grassroots now. They're just probably a little bit more knowledgeable and experienced and qualified than I was previously. But for me, it's doing that and just go into stuff with open eyes. Just because it's not your preferred way of doing it doesn't mean that it's not a way that can still get results.
Yeah.
And I think I've learned that partly through this role I'm doing now, because I get to see so many different styles and types of coaches and coaching and philosophies, but also through my time working at different clubs and under different people and seeing how many different ways. So yeah, I guess that would be some of my parting advice to coaches. And I'm not saying it's the best way, but it was definitely a way it supported me. And go and get yourself educated as well. There's so much out there now, literally at the click of a button. If you want to learn about differentiation or equal playing time, or I don't know how to set up a session to get some physical returns from a football session, like there's stuff out there that's really easily accessible.
No, I'm completely with you. Like your points there that you've just given for coaches, I completely agree. You know, having a mixture of approaches, being able to see different ways of people working, being able to learn from more experienced people, being able to also try things, I think is massively important. Staying grounded, getting those experiences. I think that's something that definitely you have displayed through your career, and you know it's allowed you to be in a number of different roles, really good positions, really good roles, all the way through the pathway, and to do what you've done so far in the female game is really impressive, really good, and obviously you're now in a position where you're currently supporting a lot of coaches, a lot of players, a lot of clubs in what they're doing and having a massive impact on the female game. And hopefully, if England can keep progressing in terms of the female game, then you know it's your experiences, how the game is developing, what we're doing in these clubs that is ultimately having that positive impact on us as a nation to keep improving and keep doing well. So, Adi, I just wanted to say, you know, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your experiences. Thank you for your advice. Hopefully, the people, the viewers watching, can take some key moments from that. And as long as you don't mind, I'll put your tag on Twitter, and if anyone's got any questions or stuff, they can either put it on the comments here or tweet you and give you a message if you're happy with that.
Yeah, that's fine. You're welcome to put any contact details on. Happy for coaches to reach out. And I mean that genuinely. I often say this, of course, if you want to reach out and ask something, if I don't know the answer, part of my job, I get to say most people do. And me and lots of really intelligent, clever people, and you know, listening to them. Happy to help people, you know, if I can do.
No, Adi, well, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. All the best for this season. Enjoy another year working in the game we love, and yeah, look forward to catch up with you soon.
Yeah, no, thanks, Simon. Appreciate your time. Hopefully, some good listening for you.
No, absolutely, Adi. Thank you very much, and look forward to speaking to you soon.
Yeah, we'll do.
Thank you.